Hello. So happy to be with you today. I am Pamela Eakins, and what I am looking forward to sharing with you today is a talk about women's secret societies, and in particular for today, the Circle Druids. And this should be probably more appropriately titled the Circle Druids of California. So here is how it all began, how my interest started. I am a member of the Odd Fellows Lodge, Odd Fellows Ocean View Lodge number 143 in Half Moon Bay, California. In 2024, the lodge received a surprise gift, and this surprise gift was the minutes of the lodge meetings from 1933 to 1938. Well, these minutes had been stored for decades in the archives, which means somebody's closet or basement, wherever, of the native daughters of the Golden West. And this is exactly what it looked like: old, rotting, crumbling paper tied together by ribbons. In the minutes, the Druids were called the Lady Druids, and they had rented the lodge from 1933 to 38. The native daughters of the Golden West also rented the lodge from 1933 to 38, and both groups paid $7.50 per rental date. So they were doing their business that was whatever they were doing, and we will find out. They were doing their business in Half Moon Bay, in the lodge, over all that period of years. And there is one place where it is recorded in the minutes that the Druids felt that the lodge was charging way too much money and should give them a deduction. November 25th, 1933. So these are the minutes, and this is, again, is how they were tied together with ribbons. Here's the Circle Druids, their rent $22.50 for the month, and this was their normal pattern for the group, $22.50. Well, so the Archive History Committee of the Oddfellows asked me to investigate the question, who were these people? Who were the Circle Druids? So I went on the search, I looked, I tried to find out, I asked everyone in town, and the question became not who were the Circle Druids, but who are the Circle Druids? They are alive and well, and I began to discover Circle Druids everywhere. The Circle Druids are the Women Druids of the United Ancient Order of Druids, which is very much alive and well all over the United States, but particularly in California. This is Tracy Stevens, the Grand Archdruidess of California from 2022 to 2023. So I was able to tap into a lot of things that Tracy was saying as in her leadership position of the community. Tracy said, when you have a choice, always be a unicorn. So as a druidess, Tracy chose the unicorn as her emblem because the unicorn is like a druid, friendly, helpful, pure of heart, and magical. And magical is what I discovered about the Druids. The magic is extraordinary. She said every person can be all of these things. And as a Druid, it is our duty and our privilege to strive to be the best we can be. She chose, as my understanding is other Grand Archdruidesses do, she chose a charity to focus on. Tracy chose a charity called the Living Room, which is which provides a safe space for at-risk women and children to stay after leaving an abusive relationship. And when Tracy makes her declaration, she signs her declaration of service in unity, peace, and concord, which is the motto of the Druids. The seven-pointed star represents the seven guiding virtues of the Circle Druids. Those guiding virtues are honor, truth, justice, faith, hope, love, and benevolence. The seven-pointed star also represents the seven precepts of Merlin. Merlin, as it turns out, Merlin, a real person, a philosopher, the best known Druid philosopher through all time. And what these principles are, these seven precepts: labor diligently to acquire knowledge, for it is power. When in authority, decide responsibly, for thine authority may cease. Bear with fortitude the ills of life, remembering that no mortal sorrow is perpetual. Love virtue, for it bringeth peace. Abhor vice, for it bringeth evil upon all. Obey those in authority in all just things, that virtue may be exalted. And finally, cultivate the social virtues. So shalt thou be beloved by all men. So these are the seven major precepts of Druidry. Continuing with the seven-pointed star. The seven-pointed star is heavily used in Druid ritual. It represents the ancient wisdom of the seven classical planets. It is used to invoke and align with the planetary forces to achieve a desired outcome. So this is setting a scene, moving inside the ritual, and calling on the aspects of the seven classical planets. The moon represents intuition, Mars, strength and energy, Mercury, thought and communication, Jupiter, abundance, Venus, love, Saturn, form and death, and the sun represents vitality. So these seven aspects of ancient wisdom are critical and key in Druidry. Here's more about the seven-pointed star. And first I'd like to mention the five-pointed star because it is also widely used. So the five-pointed star represents the four elements, and those four elements would be fire, water, air, and earth, plus the divine spirit that holds everything together. So that's the five-pointed star. Fire, water, air, earth, divine energy, also spirit, heart, mind, body, divine energy. Fire is equated with spirit. Water is equated with heart and emotion. Air is equated with the mind, the intellect, and consciousness. Earth, the body, the physical body and action. So when you take those five and then you add above and below, you also have the seven-pointed star. So in Druidry, the seven-pointed star, as I already mentioned, represents the seven precepts of Merlin, which this star is also called in Druidry the fairy star or the elven star. Masonry also uses a seven-pointed star. And in the seven-pointed star in Masonry, which is called the emblem of perfection, those 7 points are grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, astronomy, spirituality, and enlightenment. And the whole point is to reach into and toward the understanding of life's mysteries. The Oddfellows also use the seven-pointed star and the seven principles. In Oddfellows, the principles are friendship, love, truth, faith, hope, charity, and universal justice. The worldwide Druid model for the Druids are worldwide at this point in time. The worldwide Druid motto is united to assist. And the worldwide Druid aim is the motto of unity, peace, and concord, as I mentioned earlier. So that's the aim, unity, peace, and concord. The Druids, which date back 6,000 years, they say, may be the oldest fraternal organization in the world, an ancient brotherhood composed of or comprised of wise prophets, lore keepers, physicians, astronomers, mathematicians, musicians, poets, philosophers, legislators, judges, and educators in religion and learning. The Druids were primarily on the British Isles, in the British Isles, and this is where they were discovered by Caesar when he invaded Britain in 55 BC. Druidism then was the prevailing philosophy. Here comes Kitty Cat. The Druids believed that the light of intelligence destroys the superstition of darkness and ignorance, and therefore the 7 precepts of Merlin, the great Druidic teacher. The cardinal points of Druidism then and still are belief in the supreme power of the universe, which I'll talk about in a minute, and belief in immortality of the soul. The soul lives forever. What about more contemporary Druidic history? So here we must look at Neo-Druidism in England, Neo-Druidism. Written Druidic history begins in the 18th century. Before that, even though the Druids had an alphabet and could write things down, they did not, because most of their communication was in the form of poetry and music, and they memorized the stories and passed them down that way. So written Druidic history begins in the 18th century with the founding of the Ancient Order of Druids, a secret fraternal family of wise ones organized to practice virtue and assist one another. The beginning was 1781, King's Arms Tavern in London. It was started by sympathizers with American colonists and seekers of religious freedom. The originator is considered to be Henry Hurrell, who was sitting there that day. Here comes Kitty Cat. Here's Kitty coming. I have Kitty now, so she's going to say hi. Hi, here's Angel. So, Henry Hurrell. And Henry is sitting around with the guys, and they're all throwing back an ale. And Henry says, "It appears to me that society lacks the addition of meetings to promote good fellowship, hilarity, and brotherly love. There were of old men who undertook to enlighten the people of their day and who introduced among the ancient Britons the useful and polite arts, and these were the Druids." And everybody says, "You go, Henry. How cool is that?" And thus, the Ancient Order of Druids was founded. People loved it. The first grove then came from London to New York in 1830. Druids use the term grove rather than lodge, though now that Druidry is international, sometimes around the world, Druids are using the term lodge because it's widely understood. But grove was the term that was used in the King's Arms Tavern, starting a grove of Druids. All right, and then to New York in 1830. And now we're going to leap to California, because California is the state that I want to talk about. Druids in California. So the first grove emerged in California in 1859 in Placerville. This was the gold rush, this was gold country, miners, and they needed to take care of each other. The first California grove was founded by Frederick Sieg to take care of the miners and their families. And this was their aim there and then. Take care of the sick, widows, children, and orphans, and to bury the dead, because people were frequently getting hurt in the mines and creating the mines. This first grove of Druids in California, 1859, grew into 266 groves in California, all over the state. In the early years of the 20th century, there were about 15,000 member Druids in California. And in 1917, it's really no surprise for Californians that Santa Cruz had the largest grove with 721 members. They are still in California, the Druids. Currently, there are 14 groves in the Grand Grove of California, ranging from Point Arena to Bakersfield. It should be the Grand Grove of California, from Point Arena to Bakersfield. And there are over 100 groves still in the United States. Druids are organized into groves, circles, and chapters. So the groves are the men's groups, circles are the women's groups, and chapters are open to men and women. Interestingly, there's only one chapter in the state. I will get to that in a minute. Groves, circles, and chapters do collaborate statewide, but they remain separate, which I will talk about. This is of tremendous interest, I think, to people who live in Half Moon Bay, a very small town in California. Okay, this comes from 1887, the Pacific Rural Press. So a gentleman was on his way to a Masonic funeral. And to get to this Masonic funeral, he started in Woodside, where he lived. Now, if you live out of the area, this is not going to mean anything to you, but for those in the area, I think you'll find this very interesting. So he must take his horse and buggy from Woodside over the coastal mountain range all the way to Half Moon Bay, which is on the coast, which at that time was known as Spanish Town, not Half Moon Bay. It was called Spanish Town. Then he needs to go all the way down the coast, about 14 miles or so, to Pescadero. That was his destination for this Masonic funeral. So driving through Spanish Town in his buggy, Spanish Town had a population of about 900, and he's on his way to the funeral. He says the buildings appear moss-grown with age. The inhabitants are yearning for a railway and a new road inland. From Woodside to Spanish Town is a long, windy 34 miles, but with a new road, it can be cut to 18. So this is the big movement of the day. Now we have superhighways everywhere. Driving down the coast, there are agate beaches, opals, carnelians, onyx, turquoise, and much hunting and fishing. And then Pescadero, which had been a major and prosperous town of sawmills. Why? Because the redwood forests everywhere were being cut down to create wood for building during and post gold rush. So many people flooding to California. So he says, this gentleman says, in Pescadero, the Masonic order is long established and prosperous, as are the other concomitants of civilization. The Odd Fellows, a thriving lodge of 41 members. The Druids, a thriving grove of 35, and of course the schools and the churches. I got a huge kick out of this because I had no idea myself that in 1887, the Masons, the Odd Fellows, and the Druids would be considered to represent civilization itself, along with the schools and the churches, of course. What happened as the Druids came into this new movement was they actually ignited a whole philosophical movement, which I'm going to talk about that now. And that philosophical movement was called the Celtic Revival, or the Celtic Renaissance, or the Neo-Celtic Awakening, or the Ancient Order of Druids, or Druidry and Neo-Druidry. So here come these Druid groves and also the Circle Druids, the women. Now this, in terms of understanding Druidry, this is probably the most important slide in this presentation. So this is what was happening in the 18th and 19th century revival. So here's the Druidic tree of life. The seed of the tree is considered to be the ancient Druids. The trunk of the tree is the Druid revival, and the branches are the practices. So here's the overall belief. This is the overall belief, which I do love this, of Druidry. The root of our problems in the world, all our problems, is disconnection from nature. Disconnection from nature. The goal, our goal, the Druidic goal, is to reconnect with nature and Awen. You will remember that the first major belief was the supreme energy of the universe. Well, that supreme energy is called Awen. Now, Awen it's an energy flow, I'm going to say, that moves around and through, within, above, below, all that is. And we can tap this energy flow. We can tap it, we can bring it in, we can use it, we can work with it, we can channel it. We can channel spirit above. We can channel this flow of inspiration. We can channel a flow of storytelling, poetry, music, visual arts, creative work, family, friends, communities, channeling nature, channeling Awen, which is the energy of nature itself. To this end, we can enter into nature-based practices. Okay, and in these practices, here again we have earth, air, water, and fire. Those four elements, those four directions, as they're sometimes called in that in the seven-pointed star. Earth is about nature reciprocation, and that means we serve nature, nature serves us, and we work together with nature all the time. Air is wisdom, knowledge, and growth. Water, the cycles and the seasons, working within the cycles and the seasons. And fire is about practices, developing tools for today. So the Druids are using to do that, educating themselves with a lot of readings. And it was interesting to me that right now, Druids in San Francisco are reading Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Very worthwhile. And what I would like to say about this is that the Druids update their rituals continually. They are not relying on rituals from the past or rituals from 200 years ago. Everything is kept up to date in the moment, whatever is happening, and bringing the wisdom into whatever is going on and what people want to pursue right now in this very moment. Okay, and also the Druids have a church. It's called the Gnostic Celtic Church. And the seminary in that church is, quote, more of a hermitage than a ministry. So meaning when you go into the church, if you're going to study within the church, a lot of it is about going within and studying the self, if you will. So now to look at this chart for a minute, the ancient order of Druids in America. So these are the core practices and values. Channeling Awen. The element is spirit above. So we're going to have 7 elements here. Spirit above. Connecting to nature for inspiration and creativity in daily life. And then the element of air. Wisdom, knowledge, and growth. Okay, how are we going to do that? By learning about the world within and without. Lots of reading, lots of study, lots of observation. Then the element of fire, tools for today. Okay, spiritual grounding, support, and practices for the 21st century. I really like this because it sets the Druids apart from other groups who are repeating ancient knowledge, rituals, and practices. The Druids are updating practices for the 21st century. Okay, then element of spirit below, nature connection and wildcrafting. And this is about connecting with local ecosystems. And then how do we work with those local ecosystems? How do we craft local druidries? Okay, how do we work with nature? I would say, for example, people would be really interested in native species here. And then working with that. Okay, then the element of water, the cycles and the seasons. How will we celebrate cycles of the sun and the earth and attune with nature? And here are the major cycles and seasons that will be celebrated would be the solstices, the equinoxes, and the cross holidays in between. So what's happening at winter solstice as in the longest night of the year, and then summer solstice, longest day of the year, equinoxes, equal balance. So what is going on within and without at each one of those, during each one of those times? Then we go to the element of earth, nature, reciprocation. Okay, this is all about living in balance and harmony with the earth. And how does that work with the seasons of our own lives, lifestyle changes and rituals for our own lives? And then internally, this is the element of spirit within, spiritual development and expression, which is a very, very big part of Druidry. Diverse past, diverse beliefs. Druidry is non-dogmatic. It seeks to bring the inner self out into the outer world. There are 3 levels of Druidry called the Ovate, the Bard, and the Druid. So the Ovate is a beginner, the seed of an egg, the learning begins. Okay, so now it just starts. Let's imagine what we can become. How could our lives be? What is the meaning of plenty? Of abundance. Okay, then we move to the bard level. The bard's a poet. The bard's a musician. Okay, the bard, and that's a metaphor, and it's also real. There's a lot of music in Druidry. So the bard develops out of the ovate, intense study and introspection to move to this level. A lot of reading again, a lot of understanding of our world. And here it is said, genius takes flight. The color is blue. The color of the ovate is green. Then we go to the color of blue, and that is for sky, godliness, or you might call it awenness, piety and friendship. And then the highest level is the druid level, which is white. And the druid is the poet, the teacher in charge of initiations. And that white is about purity, innocence, and joy. And red, whenever red appears, red is about courage, power, fervency, and zeal. Okay, so these are the 3 levels of the Druids. And then there are also 3 degrees in Druidry in the ancient order of Druids in America. So the first degree, a set of tools, and this involves seasonal nature observation, meditation, and lifestyle changes, because you're learning a lot as you enter in and begin to study nature. So lifestyle changes, entering into a sphere of protection and nature knowledge, doing maybe tree planting. The focus is on nature herself and one's deep connection with nature. Okay, then the second degree is deepening practice through connecting humans or ourselves and nature in a harmonic relationship. So here, entering into readings in philosophy, ecology, restorative practices, permaculture, organic gardening, green wizardry. How are we going to enter into reciprocal action with earth, seasonal rituals, grove rituals, and sharing knowledge? Then this part I love. I can't tell you how much I love this. Okay, third degree, help shape Druidic tradition. Move beyond the established patterns and knowledge, even in Druidry. And here at the third level, you get to create an original project. Who will you be? What will you do? How will you contribute? Poetry has always been paramount in Druidry. This is probably the most famous poem in Druidry, and it is from, I put here, dates before the Roman invasion. So this is BC, this poem. And you'll see a lot of different translations of this poem. I am a wind on the sea. I am a wave of the sea. I am the sound of oceans. I am a stag of 7 tines. I am a vulture on a cliff top. I am a tear of the sun. I am fair among flowers. I am a wild boar. I am a salmon in a river. I am a lake upon the plain. I am a hill of poetry. I am a spearhead ready for action. I am a god who forms fire for a head. That's translated by Robert Graves, but in another translation, I am a wizard who forms fire for a head. This is the Song of Emergent, the most famous Druid poet. Going back to the idea that there is a supreme energy that flows through the universe that can be tapped, that can be channeled, that can be worked. And also the number 2 most important idea is immortality. This poem is talking about, you have been all of these things. You have been the wind. You've been the water. You've been a sound. You've been a stag. And these animals, these are the powerful animals in Druidry. A stag, a vulture, a wild boar. You've been a flower. You've been a salmon. Everything is in you. You are all that, and everything is interrelated. Now, to move specifically to Druidic women, because this was my assignment. Look into the women. So I did. And I met Druids, women, fabulous. Women were involved and active in the Druidic movement from the beginning, but the men would not grant them the full powers of participation and leadership, which they were not happy about. Many women's circles formed, but they didn't last long because they were under the thumb of the male Druids until the Great Rebellion. Okay, and here's what happened. The rebellion in California, the Grand Circle, which is all of the circles in the whole state, they're called the Grand Circle, the Grand Circle of California. Okay, the rebellion, the Grand Circle of California. In the year 1900, circle membership in the U.S., which was headquartered in Albany, New York, was about 320, but it was about to burgeon. So that's 1900. Circle membership's getting ready to take off. Okay, now, January 31st, 1900. There was a meeting in San Francisco at the San Francisco Druids Hall, or the Druids Temple, which we see in the picture on the left. And underneath it, it says, by the way, there are 22,000 Druids in California with capitalization of more than $1 million. And I think that this was probably, this picture was probably in the 1930s. I don't have a date on it. Okay, so January 31st, 1900, there's a meeting in San Francisco at the Druids Hall. 6 women's circles were represented. And at this meeting, the women drafted a dispensation for a grand circle for women for themselves, which would be separate from the men. At this meeting, they created a constitution and bylaws and held elections. They elected a grand archdruidess and others. Okay, that was January 31st, 1900. The men were very unhappy about this. Okay, now, cut to 1912. The problems continued between the men and the women. So now, January 20th, 1912. The Grand Circle convened. They felt unsupported by the men, and they decided to incorporate independently, and they filed for incorporation with the state of California. Then what happened was they stopped paying their dues to the Druids. No representation, no dues. Okay, so then the men got very angry because the women refused to pay their dues, and on September 17th, 1912, the male Druids expelled the Grand Circle, all the women. They expelled all the women because they refused to pay their dues. But then, surprise, synchronistically, September 18th, 1912, so that was September 17th when they were expelled, September 18th, 1912, the Grand Circle received incorporation status from the state of California. Woohoo! And the Grand Circle has remained independent ever since. Okay, and now, 1925, enter Ella Young. So I discovered all about Ella in my research. And so under Ella Young, or with Ella Young, the women's Druidic Renaissance flourishes. So here comes Ella Young, 1867 to 1956. Well, Ella was from Ireland. In 1925, so we were talking about 1900, then 1912, and now leap up to 1925. Ella immigrates to the United States at age 58. Okay, she was very tired of the war in Ireland. I heard she was a gun runner in Ireland. She was exhausted. Okay, so she comes to California, United States. She takes on the role of the druidess, and she dresses like a druidess, and she lives like a druidess, close to nature, within nature. And she began to go around talking to people, teaching people, going deeper and deeper in what it means to have an earth-based type of spirituality. And Ella lived in Santa Cruz, Carmel, Point Lobos, Oceano. She spent time at Mount Tamalpais and Mount Shasta. I found her in Oceano. I went to where she lived. I spent time there. I talked to everybody. A lot of people knew who he was. She died in 1956. They say Ella Young was absolutely unforgettable. She wasn't a member of the formal Druid circle, the women's circle. But what happened is, as she walked around and traveled teaching people about Celtic spirituality, the membership in the Druid circles began to really increase, especially right where I live, Half Moon Bay, and where our Druids were meeting in the Oddfellows Lodge. Okay, so the membership in the Druid circles increased dramatically from San Luis Obispo, which is in Central California, all the way north to Half Moon Bay, and all the way through the Santa Cruz Mountains, where there were circles of Druid women everywhere practicing, thanks to Ella. She brought forward an ecological consciousness. They said she had encyclopedic knowledge of Irish mythology. She was very highly educated in Ireland at the Royal University of Ireland and Trinity College in Dublin. And this, to me, this is the wildest part. She was 58 when she came to the United States. Well, she got a teaching job at UC Berkeley after age 58. Just coming from Ireland, teaching Celtic studies, Coir, I'm not quite sure about the pronunciation, which is the natural balance of life. She taught kinship with the earth. The land holds spirits, she said. The land is alive, she said. You can talk to a mountain, and humans are part of the planet. We are not here to dominate. So any of you who know my philosophy know I'm really on board with that. So I was so excited to find Ella Young. She wrote many books, mythology, poetry, children's books, and these are some of her books: Celtic Wonder Tales, The Wondersmith and His Son, The Coming of Luke, The Unicorn with the Silver Shoes, and then At the Gates of Dawn is a collection of her writings. So I think what's going to happen, her autobiography is going to be released again soon. Many of her books are out of print, but they're beginning to come back. There's a movement right now. So as I went to find her, I found her where a lot of her, let's say, a lot of artifacts of Ella were and lived in Oceano, California. So here's her desk. And here's a picture of her, and that's me on the right, sitting at her desk. I couldn't wait to sit at her desk. Let me sit at her desk. I wanted to see if I could channel some of the energy of Ella Young through sitting at her desk. And it's like, okay, here we go. I wonder what I can do from this point on. She taught the earth is sacred. And again, she was so influential, and she was very influential with the Dunites of Oceano. So the Dunites were a major artist community. They were artists, they were musicians, poets. So they lived essentially in the dunes on the beach from 1925 to 1945. They were really, really active. And then up until 1976. And the truth is, they're still there. because I found Do Nights. I talked to Do Nights. I got into their philosophy. Oh, there's so much more about this story. I was sent by those who know to the beach. Okay, the beach, Oso Flaco Beach, and also Point Lobos. Okay, for those of you who are familiar with Central California and so on, Ella believed that in these places, especially Oso Flaco Beach, which is in Oceano, in this place, the veil between the worlds is thin. And if you go there, you can download from the universe and come alive. You can come alive as the universe. And that's where all the creativity is, the music, the poetry, everything. So there's a place you can channel it. So you're looking for places which feel magical, because the earth is alive, the earth is magical. The redwood trees are magical, the groves are magical, the beaches are magical. Ella was friends with and greatly influenced Robinson Jeffers, fabulous poet here, Elsa Gidlow, Alan Watts, Ansel Adams, who was a good friend of hers, Sinclair Lewis, Ella Winter, Upton Sinclair, Lincoln Steffers, and Harry Partch, who set a lot of her poems to music. And she booked it to New Mexico with Ansel Adams. They went there together and they hung out with Georgia O'Keeffe. And right now, because of what she did in the United States and how she brought Celtic history and mythology and druidry to the United States, the Irish government is currently funding a play about Ella Young. And you can find out about this on ellayoung.org. And I've been in pretty close touch with the Irish people who actually put me, well, they weren't the first ones. They put me on the track of Ella Young, but the first person who put me on the track of Ella Young was the High Druid Chief of California. And he said, you're not going to know anything really about Druidry until you find Ella. And I found her. Ella inspired everybody, especially women. But men were hugely inspired by her too. So this is a facsimile here that we're looking at. It's a redwood grove. And in the redwood grove, I put two women in druid costumes. And I want to tell you that these costumes are available and for sale, mainly on Etsy. So if you want your own costume and you want to get ready to go, check out these costumes. Okay, so in the next few slides, you will see some of these druid costumes, contemporary. Oh, which brought up the question in my mind. For example, when I went to the Renaissance Fair, I was asking myself, okay, here are a lot of druid-looking people. How many of them are real druids? And what I found out when I brought it up as a joke is walking to the Renaissance Fair and bringing this up. Oh, I'm doing a study of druids. And the people I was walking to the fair with said, well, we're druids. And they were, and I mean they were involved in the organization. Druids are everywhere. So the Grand Circle of Druids in California, after they separated, they began to create all these different helpful charitable organizations. They created in 1918 a funeral fund for their members and maybe for others. 1921, an orphan fund. 1928, a relief fund. 1951, a scholarship fund. 1955, hospitalization fund. So a big part of their work became charitable acts. They also became really involved in ecological acts. Save the redwoods. Okay, so inspired. Here's Kitty Cat. Hold on. Here's Kitty Cat again. Here's Angel. participating. Okay, so inspired by Ellie Young and this growing environmental movement, the Circle Druids began to flourish, as I already said, especially from Half Moon Bay to San Luis Obispo. Well, they noticed the redwood forests were being absolutely decimated, cut down all along the coast. You know, the redwood forest, it's the lungs of the continent, and they're clear cutting redwood forest. So Ellie Young, among others, left the bulk of her estate to the Save the Redwoods League. And then what I found very interesting is in 1993, the Save the Redwoods League gave a gift of $2 million for the preservation of the 4,471 acre Purisima Creek Redwoods in Purisima Creek Canyon. So if you don't live here, this means nothing to you. But if you live here, Half Moon Bay, you know this as our most sacred redwood grove, and just absolutely beautiful at Higgins Purisima Canyon. So that's for all the people who lived here, so who do live here. So Save the Redwoods League, and they saved our very special redwoods, and a big part of that is thanks to the Druids from Half Moon Bay, our own lodge, all the way down to Santa Cruz, and especially to Ellie Young. So here is what it may have looked like with the Druids doing a ritual in this grove. And this is Higgins Purisima Canyon, the one that I'm talking about, our beautiful redwoods. I also connected with the Grand Druid Circle from California, Amanda Anderson here. This is off Facebook. So yeah, she was very helpful for me. And on the right, we see her mom, and her mom was having her 50th anniversary of being a Druid. So there she is celebrating. Right now, 7 circles remain in the California Grand Circle, and these range through the state from Point Arena, which is way up north, to San Carlos, which is very close to where I am. These are the only remaining circles now in the United States. So there are also, by the way, California was totally different. The rest of the United States did not do what the California Women's Circle did. They did not separate off, and then they began to die out, I believe. Okay, so currently there are, again, 7 circles of women. There are 14 groves of men and 1 chapter, which is a mixed group. Again, in the mid-30s, when the Circle Druids were thriving, and the whole Neo-Celtic movement was thriving, and that's when they were in Half Moon Bay in the Oddfellows Lodge, probably in a lot of other Oddfellows lodges around the state too. Oddfellows was very prolific in California. The Circle Druids were central in birthing the 20th century women's spirituality movement. Okay, I have been in women's spirituality for decades. I did not know this. So I have just recently learned how important the Druids were to bringing out this women's spirituality movement, which was, I will tell you this about the women's spirituality movement in the 80s is when it really took off, the 1980s. During that time period, just that decade, the first 500 books that came out about this ecofeminism and this whole new movement of women's spirituality, the first 500 books, almost all of them came out of the San Francisco area. So it says something about the consciousness here. And we didn't even know that we were what do we call it? Flying on the tails of amazing women. Circle Druids in the Oddfellows Lodge. So here's the lodge. So we ask the question, where are you now? Where are you now? And we feel the energies. And if we feel deeply enough into it, we can begin to feel their presence. We can feel it come alive. So just imagine yourself in the lodge, feeling the presence of the Circle Druids, 1933 to 1938, coming alive.
Sunken secrets of yourself. Find love and light without you as within. And wake new wonders by the banks of the Boyne. The banks of the Boyne.
And that's an ancient Druid song sung by Lodge member Judy Engel, who is in the left in this picture. Thank you, Judy, for the ancient, beautiful Druid song. We feel your presence. Your memory lives in our lodge, in the preservation of our redwood groves, and on our pristine ocean shores. We can feel you. May we cherish the sacred earth. May the sacred earth cherish us. This is the message of the Druids. Circle Druid wisdom from Tracy Stevens, the recent Grand Druidess of California. Be kind, connect, be present, create, and save the planet. In short, be a unicorn. Be a unicorn. Save the planet. Druidry lives on, and so it does. Here's the center of ancient Druidry, Stonehenge, and it continues. This is a contemporary solstice celebration, celebrating the earth, celebrating the sun. And while I was working on this, which was summer 2024, I happened to receive the magazine from the Sierra Club, as I'm a member, and I just opened the top page, and there was a writing by the editor-in-chief of the magazine, Jason Mark, and I just glanced at it, and I was so surprised to see him write this. He writes, I have a time machine in my backyard, a Douglas fir, 101 feet tall, about 325 years old. I live in the shadow of an ancient. Any good portal, he writes, to the fourth dimension works in both directions. It can take you back or cast you forward, ordering and opening to all sorts of alternate futures. I can picture my big fir still standing for human generations to come, surviving the floods and fires that are likely to be the hallmark of the century. Like the legacy forests of the Northeast, my Douglas fir could be the anchor of a deep green regeneration, an old growth future. I don't think he's a druid, but he might be, because this is druid philosophy in a nutshell. And now, if you're with me, we can call in the magic together and remember the magic. Remember the poetry. Remember the songs. Remember that we have been everything, that Awen flows through and around all, the sacred energy of the universe. Everything is interrelated. I am a wind on the sea. I am a wave on the sea. I am a salmon in a river. I am a wind on the sea. I am a wave on the sea. I am a salmon in a river. I am a wind on the sea. I am a wave on the sea. I am a salmon in a river. And here I would like to say thank you so much. Thank you, Odd Fellows, for this wonderful assignment of exploring the Circle Druids. I loved it so much. And thank you, Judy, for singing the Salmon God song for us. So beautiful. And here I want to point out Ella Young's chair. This is the chair that she sat in. And I thought maybe if I sat in her chair, I would receive a visit from the muse. So I sat in her chair and called Ella in and asked for a vision, which I'm still receiving. Thank you, Ella. Thank you so much. And here is a film, brand new, just out. It's only a couple of minutes long. It's about Ella Young, and it was done by Irish women, Linda Rosewood, who came on pilgrimage looking for Ella Young to Central California, and I have been in touch with them. You must watch this video. You must. It's all about the living earth, and you will be so inspired. So I am hoping that you can click on it right now. If you can't, Ella Young, Kinship with the Earth. That's what it's called. Please find it on YouTube. And for more information, you can go to the Druids Grand Circle of California, www.californiadruids.org, Unity, Peace, and Concord. And here we are coming to an end. And again, I want to say thank you so much for listening, and I'm so excited to be able to share this with you. Unity, Peace, and Concord. Earth, sky, stars, universe, here we go. Thank you.